Right now, a drafted executive order is sitting in the Oval Office that would fundamentally dismantle the way childhood medicine is practiced in the United States. It is titled the Gold Standard Childhood Vaccine Recommendations, but it does not come from the American Academy of Pediatrics. It does not come from a consensus of independent medical researchers. It comes directly from the desk of the president. According to a draft obtained by the Washington Post, this order directs federal agencies to mandate a massive logistical shift. It states that all childhood immunizations should be administered at separate medical visits. The combined measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, universally known as the MMR, would be broken apart. Three diseases, three separate visits. The immediate justification relies on a belief held by a vocal group of vaccine skeptics who argue that combining these shots causes undocumented problems. But the documented medical consensus, backed by extensive peer-reviewed studies, shows the MMR vaccine is entirely safe. The official explanation contradicts the available evidence, and the consequences of this contradiction will not be felt by politicians in Washington. They will be felt in waiting rooms, in pediatric clinics, and in homes across the country. We are going to look closely at what this document actually demands, why the timeline is crucial, and what happens when political directives override established scientific data. To understand the magnitude of this decision, we have to examine the language of the draft itself. The executive order claims it is not feasible to administer these immunizations together. It directs federal agencies to take steps to advance these separated schedules to the maximum extent feasible. This is not a gentle suggestion or a public awareness campaign. It is a direct mandate aimed at the machinery of the federal government. By ordering federal agencies to enforce this separation, the administration is effectively weaponizing the bureaucracy to alter a standard of care that has protected generations of children. The White House is attempting to redefine what constitutes reliable medical practice by branding this initiative as the gold standard. In science and medicine, a gold standard refers to a rigorously tested, universally accepted benchmark based on the highest level of empirical evidence. By co-opting this exact phrase, the drafters of this order are engaging in a deliberate rhetorical strategy. They are attempting to make a politically motivated, skepticism-based schedule sound like a major scientific breakthrough, but changing the name of a policy does not change the reality of how it impacts a child. Understanding how political decisions reshape our everyday lives requires looking past the official titles and examining the actual consequences. So if you value independent, fact-driven investigations that cut through the noise, please subscribe to this channel so we can continue holding these policies accountable together. Let us look at what this mandate actually means for an ordinary family. The draft order explicitly targets the MMR vaccine, insisting on separate visits for measles, mumps, and rubella. Parents understand the logistical mountain of simply getting a toddler to the doctor for one scheduled checkup. It requires taking time off work, which for many hourly workers means losing a portion of their paycheck. It requires securing reliable transportation. It requires navigating pediatric clinic schedules that are frequently stretched thin and booked weeks or even months in advance. Under the current established standard of care, a child receives multiple crucial protections in one highly efficient visit. This executive order would deliberately erase that efficiency. Doctors are already raising the alarm about what happens next, and their concern is not theoretical. It is grounded in the hard reality of human behavior and socioeconomic limits. Medical professionals are warning that if you mandate more medical visits for children in that critical early age range, parents are simply going to miss them. Appointments will be delayed, schedules will inevitably slip. A family might successfully make the first appointment for the measles shot, but what happens when the car breaks down or a shift at work changes or the clinic has no availability for the follow-up mumps or rubella appointments? The direct human consequence of this executive order is that children will go without protection for longer periods. They will be left exposed. Measles, mumps, and rubella are classified by medical professionals as very serious viruses for a profound reason. Measles, in particular, is one of the most highly contagious airborne diseases known to science. The primary reason we do not see widespread, devastating outbreaks in every community every single year is because of the sheer efficiency of the current combined vaccine schedule. The combined MMR shot was designed specifically to close the window of vulnerability as quickly and safely as possible. When doctors warn that kids are potentially going to be put at risk, they are pointing directly to that artificially created delay. If a child receives only the measles component but has to wait an unpredictable amount of time for another separate appointment to receive the mumps or rubella components, that child remains actively vulnerable. The draft executive order completely ignores this biological reality. It prioritizes a theoretical schedule based on skepticism over a practical schedule based on documented clinical success. The risk is not isolated to the individual child who misses a follow-up appointment. It extends to the broader community. The concept of herd immunity relies on a vast majority of the population being immunized simultaneously to prevent a virus from finding a host. By stretching out the timeline and increasing the likelihood of missed appointments, this executive order threatens to degrade that collective shield, putting immunocompromised individuals and infants who are too young to receive any vaccines at severe risk. Here is where the story demands very careful scrutiny, and where the official rationale begins to fall apart under the weight of evidence. The push to separate the MMR vaccine into distinct shots is not a new concept, but it is crucial to state clearly that it has never been a medically supported one. The source material highlights that a lot of people out there who identify as vaccine skeptics genuinely believe that giving these immunizations to children altogether causes problems. That is their stated belief. But belief, no matter how strongly held or loudly voiced, is not evidence. Decades of independent, rigorously peer-reviewed studies conducted across multiple countries have consistently and conclusively shown that the combined MMR vaccine is safe. The human immune system is incredibly robust. From the moment a child is born, their body encounters and processes thousands of unique antigens every single day just by breathing, eating, and interacting with the environment. The antigens present in the combined MMR vaccine represent a microscopic, easily managed fraction of what a child's immune system handles naturally. The available clinical evidence firmly establishes that separating these vaccines does not increase a child's safety. In fact, as pediatricians are currently warning, it actively decreases safety by extending the amount of time a child is vulnerable to infection. Yet, this draft executive order intentionally elevates the skeptic's unsupported belief above the established scientific data, granting it the immense weight and authority of federal policy. When you draft an executive order that upends the nation's childhood vaccine schedule, the burden of proof should logically rest on those demanding the change. They should be required to present undeniable peer-reviewed data proving that the current system is harmful and that their proposed alternative is safer, but that evidence does not exist. The official explanation for this sweeping mandate does not match the available reality. Instead of relying on data, the administration is relying on executive authority to force a change that the medical and scientific communities actively oppose. The draft order introduces another significant complication that raises serious questions about the administration's long-term intentions. The text reveals that the White House would divide childhood vaccines into three distinct categories. The draft obtained by the Washington Post does not provide an exhaustive breakdown of the specific criteria for these three categories, but the structural implication is massive. By forcing vaccines into a tiered system, the federal government is positioning itself to subjectively evaluate and rank immunizations, essentially stripping that critical role away from independent medical advisory committees and placing it directly into the hands of political appointees. What exactly are these three categories? Will they differentiate between vaccines deemed essential, optional, or unnecessary based on political preference rather than epidemiological need? How will federal health agencies enforce this categorization without violating their own scientific mandates? And critically, who inside the Oval Office is making the final determination on which life-saving vaccine falls into which politically defined tier? These are not minor administrative details. They are fundamental questions about who controls public health standards, and currently those questions remain entirely unanswered. This brings us to a parallel development happening at this exact moment, one that provides crucial context for how this executive order might be enforced. Todd Blanche has just been confirmed as the Attorney General of the United States. The timing of this confirmation, occurring right as the White House prepares to sign an executive order overhauling childhood vaccines, is a vital piece of the broader investigative picture. The Attorney General is the highest law enforcement officer in the country, commanding the Department of Justice. As we have discussed, this executive order does not merely make a polite suggestion to the public. It explicitly directs federal agencies to take definitive steps to advance these new categories and separate medical visits to the maximum extent feasible. When a president issues an executive order directing federal agencies to fundamentally alter a deeply entrenched, scientifically backed system like public health recommendations, aggressive legal challenges are not just possible. They are practically guaranteed. states that prioritize public health, independent medical boards, and pediatric advocacy groups frequently challenge federal overreach in federal court. When those lawsuits are filed, attempting to block the implementation of this fragmented vaccine schedule, it will be the Department of Justice that is tasked with defending the executive order. Todd Blanche will now oversee the legal strategy designed to protect a policy that contradicts established medical science. This creates a profound institutional conflict. Historically, federal health agencies have relied on clinical consensus to formulate guidelines, and the Justice Department has defended those evidence-based guidelines. Now, the Justice Department may be required to argue in federal court that a politically drafted document holds more authority over pediatric care than decades of peer-reviewed safety studies. The legal framework of how this will be navigated and whether the courts will allow an administration to mandate medical inefficiency under the guise of executive privilege remains one of the most significant legal implications of this entire development. We must also examine a very specific and revealing phrase tucked inside the draft obtained by the Washington Post. The text allegedly states that it is not feasible to administer all childhood immunizations at the same time. This is a staggering documented contradiction. For decades, the medical community has proven not only that it is feasible, but that it is the most effective, safe, and reliable method of ensuring widespread immunity. The combined MMR vaccine is the living proof of that feasibility. By writing the words "not feasible" into an official executive order, the drafters are essentially attempting to rewrite reality by decree. They are taking a process that happens safely thousands of times a day in pediatric clinics across the globe and declaring it impossible simply because it conflicts with the ideology of vaccine skeptics. This is a classic example of an official explanation failing to match the available evidence. Beyond the legal battles and the political maneuvering, there is a profound human element to this story that cannot be ignored. The relationship between a pediatrician and a parent is built on a foundation of trust. Parents rely on their doctors to provide guidance based on the safest, most current medical knowledge. This executive order aggressively inserts the federal government right into the middle of that exam room, actively undermining that crucial relationship. When a doctor tells a parent that the combined MMR shot is safe and highly recommended, but the federal government issues a mandate dividing the shots and implying that combination is dangerous, it creates deep, unnecessary confusion. This confusion is not a byproduct of the policy. It appears to be the point of the policy. By elevating skepticism to the level of federal regulation, the administration validates unfounded fears and makes the grueling job of a pediatrician significantly harder. Doctors will now have to spend precious time during already shortened appointments fighting against federally sponsored misinformation, trying to convince parents to stick to a schedule that the government itself is trying to dismantle. This situation represents a profound failure of leadership at the highest levels. Executive power is meant to be used to solve complex national problems, coordinate crisis responses, and protect the public welfare. Using that immense power to mandate a medically unsound, logistically disastrous pediatric schedule is an abuse of that authority. It demonstrates a willingness to gamble with children's health in order to satisfy a specific vocal political constituency. If a child contracts measles because a politically mandated delay in their vaccine schedule left them exposed, who exactly bears the responsibility? Will the drafters of this executive order step forward to take accountability for the outbreaks that follow? Will the administration acknowledge that their gold standard policy directly resulted in increased transmission of very serious viruses? Historical precedent suggests they will not. The burden, as always, will fall on the parents navigating the overwhelmed healthcare system, the children suffering from preventable illnesses, and the healthcare workers scrambling to contain outbreaks that never should have happened in the first place. As we watch this story develop, several critical factors require our immediate attention. We need to see the exact final text of the order to confirm if the radical mandates outlined in the draft remain intact. We need to identify exactly which officials authored the three-category system and demand transparency regarding the criteria they are using to classify these life-saving immunizations. We must monitor how federal health agencies respond to being ordered to advance policies that directly contradict their own foundational scientific research. And we must closely observe the legal maneuvers of newly confirmed Attorney General Todd Blanche as the Department of Justice prepares to defend this unprecedented interference in pediatric medicine. The available evidence establishes clearly that the MMR vaccine is safe, that separating it creates dangerous logistical barriers, and that the stated rationale for this executive order is entirely divorced from scientific reality. What remains unknown is just how far the administration is willing to go to enforce this mandate and how much damage will be done to the nation's public health infrastructure in the process. Ultimately, this investigation reveals a deeply concerning shift in how federal power is being wielded. We began by looking at an executive order claiming to establish a gold standard, but the evidence shows it abandons rigorous medical standards in favor of unsupported skepticism. It creates an artificial logistical nightmare that will inevitably result in unprotected children, forcing federal agencies to participate in a massive contradiction of established science. This story matters deeply because it is not just a debate about a single vaccine. It is a fundamental conflict over whether empirical evidence or political ideology will dictate the future of public health in this country. The decisions being made right now in the Oval Office will have lasting, measurable consequences on the safety of our communities. Thank you for taking the time to examine the facts with me, and please remember to subscribe to the channel so we can continue to bring you the clear, independent investigations you deserve.